It is 12:33. First of all, let's do approval of the minutes from the last meeting. If there's a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Go ahead.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion, changes, amendments? I'd like to propose that in item 6, the word guidelines be changed to structure. There's a B. So it would say the 2012-13 budget structure must be developed no later than June 30th, just to make it more clear that we're not talking about the guiding principles and directions.
Oh. Yeah, number 6.
What was the change again?
The changes in item 6, budget development schedule, just to change the word guidelines to structure. We just started. Okay. Are there any other changes or amendments, corrections? Okay. Is there any objection to approving the minutes as amended? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, and okay, what I'd like to do now is just take the comment. We have 2 speaker cards, and let me do them in order. Andrew Bott. And then Betsy Porter.
I just have a quick comment. Obviously, I can't be here every meeting, and I actually have somewhere I have to be, so I won't be able to stay this entire meeting either. But I just wanted to express my appreciation for the guiding principles that you all put forth, having the effects on student access be minimized in these budget cuts and the very stressful budget times. I would say that the language could have been a little bit less negative, where instead of minimizing the effects on student access, it could be perhaps having student access be labeled as the most important continued purpose of the budget. But I would just appreciate either way, no matter how the wording is, that I would appreciate it if that were followed, and if as these budget meetings move forward, that is definitely the guiding principle of these meetings, and that it's on everyone's mind every single meeting. So I want to thank you all for bringing here and moving this forward, and hopefully things keep getting better. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy?
Hi, this is Principal Nurse. I'm one of the 2 graduation evaluators here on campus, and I just have a question about the guiding principles and directions under the Educational Master Plan, the second statement that says associate degrees awarded by PCC will be increased. And my question is everyone's goal to actually increase the number of degrees awarded by PCC, or is the goal to increase the number of students who receive a degree at PCC? Because then those students move out of the way for more students to come in and get a degree. And what we have happening now, I think it's great to increase degrees, but we have people getting 3, 4 degrees, and those people are staying in classes, staying at PCC longer to get that extra degree when they already have one. For example, spring 2011, the first 25 people on my grad list, 25 people, we awarded 29 degrees, so there were, multiples. Spring 2012, the first 25 people on my grad list are requesting 43 degrees between the 25. So what you have is people going, gosh, I'm going to stay and take that one sociology class so I can get that 4th degree, which kind of seems to me to defeat the purpose of making our education available to more students. So that's my concern, is the wording on that.
Okay. Bob Miller, can you address, that's from the Educational Master Plan. Can you address that?
The goal is completers. And I think that from an enrollment management committee point of view, this would be a good thing for that group to begin to address, because what you're really speaking to here is what defines a completer, and to what extent does a student have a right to achieve multiple AA and or AS degrees. in their stay here at Pasadena City College. And I suspect that there are state laws that speak to that, Title V regulations that speak to that, and that to some degree it's not as much of a local control issue as we might hope it could be, frankly, because I know what you're saying, is that we have people who are here taking valuable seats and valuable opportunities for students who are perhaps graduating from high school and just want to sort of get in and get on with their academic career. So I think that this would be something that we can take up. The co-chair of the Enrollment Management Committee is here, President Martinez of the Faculty Senate, Academic Senate, and I think both of us heard your concern, and perhaps we can agendize it and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that you are very aware of it since you do the grad checks and you know exactly what's going on.
Well, and we just see more and more students, you know, I mean, this semester, it's just like every petition, okay, I'm going to get 3, I'm going to get 4, and then it just seems like it would be better if we were having more petition, you know, more students, obviously, instead of those same people getting 3 or 4 degrees.
Right. Okay, so we'll definitely look into it. Thank you so much.
Okay, discussion of possible action, educational master plan, which we just talked about, and the guiding principles. So let's talk about the guiding principles now. Keith and I presented to the Board of Trustees 2 days ago the guiding principles and directions that we approved the last time. This is not the exhaustive list of all the things we talked about. These are the things that we came to a consensus on the last time. So they are now approved by the board, and these will be the guiding principles. Now, what I mentioned at the board too is that they will be amended. They will be added to, you know, as necessary, and we'll bring it up each meeting. So if there's any comment on that, but otherwise I will pass out the next one, which will be 2 new principles that I would propose.
Did you mention that you were going to take those to the Board of Trustees? Because we were having sort of a general conversation. I thought we were just starting the conversation. And
Well-
I was a little shocked when I saw that you went to the board and got it approved by the board.
Those were the ones that we approved the last time. So each time, what we'll do is Keith and I will take that to the Board of Trustees as we approve more or as we propose amendments. So by way of example, the one that was just mentioned about the associate degrees, to the extent that the educational master plan is amended, then we'll bring forward to the board an amendment there as well. So this time, what I'm proposing is 2 new ones. One of them we talked about briefly under miscellaneous. Second one, the LA County election expenses. What I'm proposing this time is that we not budget it in this budget cycle. The reason is because technically what happens is that when you're, and we just got the bill for the election, which I think was $422,000. Okay. What really happens is if we were to budget, say, $211,000 per year, the mechanism actually is that our ending balance would rise by that amount one year, and then we would overexpend the subsequent year. So the reality of it is, it doesn't help that much to do it, I don't think. So if we're going to budget it this coming year with no election, well, we have to put that money somewhere. The net effect is it'll add to the bottom line. The following year, we'll have to draw that back down again. So my personal suggestion is that we don't budget it next year. The following year, we will have to budget again. The following year, we won't, et cetera. Now, you know, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I'm not sure that there's any particular advantage to budgeting it every year.
So are you saying that since it costs $422, normally you do $211 every year, you do nothing this year and then $422 next year?
Right, the following year.
Yep.
Next year, we would
Sorry.
not budget, right.
So for 13, 14.
Right. When there's actually an election, we would budget for it again. Now, realize that if the next time there will be 3 trustees. This last time we had 4, but 1 ran unopposed, therefore we really had 3. Okay, it's possible in the next budget cycle that 1 might be opposed or none be opposed, at which point then there'd be no election expense. So it just seems more practical to me to not budget it for the coming year. So that's one of the suggestions that I would have. The second one is the budget will be established assuming no tax increases approved in November. Now, obviously, there are different perspectives, but the conservative perspective for budgeting is that you not budget what you don't know will occur. I don't think there's a very good chance of that passing. My opinion doesn't really count for much, however, because I can't foresee the future. But what I do know is if we were to base our budget on not having it cut next year, and then it is cut mid-year, that is a very much more difficult process to recover from. Because it means that we will have gone through about a third or almost half the year by the time that we have to make the adjustments, and it makes it more difficult. So those are the two that I would propose that we add to the guiding principles. So if anybody has any discussion.
In terms of the first one about assuming the tax initiative does not pass, would it be possible to have another guiding principle saying that if it were to happen, at least that way we had on paper that if it were to pass, then it would be a positive trigger here on campus?
Yes. So let me, for the next meeting, I will add that one and bring it back prior to it going to the board so that we actually see the language before.
So the idea is that we would come up with a budget without it included, but there would be an alternate budget
Yes.
with it included.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll have a backup plan in case it doesn't pass. Okay, I will
Rick,
bring that.
Could I ask a question
Yeah.
just for clarity? If the tax measure passes, we do not in fact receive enhanced revenue, it's just that we do not get cut, is that correct?
We don't get cut as much.
Okay.
And there's still debate about that because the economy is not recovering and the state revenues are not increasing or even stabilizing the way they'd hoped. So right now, there's a discussion about even if the thing passes, we might still have a significant budget cut.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a good deal of debate about the actual impact. Okay, so is that okay by everybody? So next time, now the next board meeting, by the way, won't be till April the 4th. So we'll probably have 3 meetings prior to that. So then we'll stack these up and take it to the board. Okay? Budget update. Let me first talk in terms of budget update about where we are with the student access and success and resource allocation. If I can ask Bob, whose office did some research, if he can pass out the research that he worked up. And I think people should find this very encouraging.
So I'll allow that to go circulate around the table. We have, I think, a few extras for folks in the audience as well. As everyone knows, the enrollment management staff and the Office of Instruction, Dr. Bell and others, we have been working on determining the direction that we may need to go in next year as we look at our budget situation. And of course, that has everything to do with how we build our schedule for next year based upon the reduced amount of FTES that we are expecting, which is, as you recall from the last meeting, we're going to be down by 1,050 FTES, bringing us to roughly 18,550, give or take. As Dr. Van Pelt just shared with us, the budget will be established assuming no tax increase is approved for November 2012, which means for the time being we have to assume that we're going to be at 18,548. So what this brings to mind is the notion of no longer, to the extent that we can, think about things in the context of sections, but think about things in the context of how can we maximize the FTES that we get, and how can we maximize the number of seats or students in classes. So 2 things were done along those lines. And the first was, and I thought I'd have hard copies of this, so I apologize, but I think they'll be here and I'll give them to you. But we brought to the board at the last board meeting strategic enrollment management planning principles for 2012-13, so last Wednesday night. And we started by stating that we'd be a maximum of no more than 2% over the funded FTES. which is roughly 370 FTES. So on top of that 18,548, we'd end up no more than 2% over that. That our priority as we move forward and build schedules would be to first move forward with the first-year experience program and pathways. In other words, we would make sure that we start students off correctly with all the activity on campus regarding the first-year experiences and all the research that's out there, and the literally thousands of colleges that have got first-year experience, or hundreds anyway, of first-year experience programs out there, and I'm sure it's over 1,000. And that we would continue to create these pathways so that as students finish their first year, they would move into a pathway that would get them closer to the completion agenda. And by way of reminder, completion agenda is degrees and transfer patterns and CTE certificates and job placements. And then with the graduation fund that the college is establishing, whatever monies that we get from that fund, and we have a goal of $1 million of people to donate, that we would mount additional sections over and above that which is funded through our FTES in what we call high demand degree transfer courses. So high demand courses that lead to degrees and transfer is where we would do that. And then the final point, which is the point that gets to the slide that we just sent around, is that we will maximize enrollments per the FTES funding. So in working with Dr. Van Pelt the other day, Crystal Kalras and I took some information, and we created this chart. And we had a nice looking chart, but Dr. Van Pelt does amazing looking charts, so this is the chart that he helped create. But it is the same chart that we created. And I want to point out that on the left side is the number of enrollments, and on the right side is our O1 Fund 1 funding that we get from the state, which essentially represents the FTES funding. And that if you look at the green line, the student access line, that is the number of enrollments or bodies and seats. And you'll see, if you look down at the bottom at the scale from 2006-07 through 12-13, that we have done an amazing job of enrolling students, even in light of the fiscal situation that we are in. Then you'll see the blue line, and the blue line is labeled student success because that's the actual number of people who complete the courses that they are in. And in a whole nother discussion at a whole nother time, we call that closing the gap. And there's a number of interventions that we talk about and are planned and will be discussed with enrollment management at the meeting on Monday, that we have planned to close that gap so that we get more success based upon the access that we provide. But the interesting line is the available resources line. Because what you note is that available resources is effectively the O1 budget. And you'll see that we had our peak per this chart in 2008-09, and then even as the budget went down and slightly went up, that we still maintained enrollments. We still kept students, we still enrolled students, even though, and we were paying for those enrollments on the basis of money that was in our reserves, or our beginning balance, however you want to call it. But but it was a double whammy, because not only did we spend the money from reserves to fund it, but we did so in light of a falling resources from the state. And where we particularly begin to fall over the cliff is in 11-12 and 12-13. And you can see the red line. And it's projected that next year, based upon our 18,550 FTES, the revenue will be down to about $103 million. And you can see that we went from a high point of about 124 million in 2008-09 down to where we project to be in 12-13. And this doesn't have it, but the little asterisk after 11-12 and 12-13, it's supposed to say projected. That's what that is, because we don't yet have the final closing for 12, and this is obviously projected for 12-13. But these numbers are very close. So the point is, we have funded access. We've done a reasonable job with success. We can do better, but we've done all that in light of a collapsing fiscal situation.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that? And I think that really does become important, because there is a misperception that student access has been reduced, and I think that is what's been occurring at most colleges. It has not been occurring at this college.
Right? That's,
Okay, now, in furtherance of that, let me, I've got a number of, let me first deal with this one.
Can I make a comment? Just to who would, if you were to know, to who are the, who's in charge of the graduation fund? Meaning, like, who would you essentially make the checks payable to or whatever?
well, right now, all of that is payable to the PCC Foundation. If you go to the front page of the website and you click on graduation fund, you'll see that the donations are going to the foundation. Dr. Bell likes to say that he's got a little lockbox in his office where that money will go to.
No, I don't like to say that.
You don't like to say that? But the point is that it'll be Dr. Bell and the deans who will be making the determination as to what the sections will be. But again, going back to the principal, it'll go to high-demand degree and transfer courses.
Okay, and then, is it possible to get all this documentation in online formats?
Well,
Like
all
all
of this,
this that you
all this will
presented.
be posted on the website in the Brac committee, and I'll be posting some of this material to the Enrollment Management Committee as well, along with President Martinez as we do it. Everything that we have in our standing committees, the idea is that it all goes up to the website per each one of the shared governance standing committee sites that are there.
Okay, thank you.
And let me just say, before I leave this, about the chart that Bob just presented. Impact of state budget on PCC student access will be minimized. The first of the guiding principles, and if this doesn't graphically show, not only has it been minimized, it's actually been enhanced.
Exactly.
Okay, so the one that I just passed out is sections versus enrollments. One of the reasons why we need to stop talking about sections is it is a remarkably imprecise unit of measurement. So what this chart shows is, or the graphic shows, is that you can have a section with one student taking one unit, and in the end we create one credit unit. That is a section. So that when we count how many sections are offered, that is a section. However, there's also a section, single section, that can have 200 students for 3 units. When you do that math, that's 600 credit units. So that's off by a factor of 600, So it might cost us $1,700 for that one section, might cost us $5,000 for the 3-unit section. Of course, those numbers vary too, which makes it even more confusing. But the difference in what a section means is vastly disparate. And when we talk about a section, so when we've talked about 45 sections reduced, some of those sections had 0 students in them, or they were 1 unit, or both. Whereas other ones can be very full, and you can have a section with 200 students in it, and there's a vast difference between cutting a section with 1 student or no students versus 200 students taking 3 units. So it's one of the reasons why the very term sections is misleading. Now, let me pass out this one. This is a report that I think clarifies or at least reduces to writing what I talked about the last time. The key points of the distinction between FTS, section counts, and total enrollment, and how those interplay with one another. The key point of an FTS, it is only important on the revenue side and has no importance at all on the expense side. We get apportionment based on FTS and only up to a cap. Once you reach that cap, it is no longer important because we don't earn more money and it doesn't cost us any more money to have additional FTS. If you drop below the FTS cap, then that will cost you money. You must at least hit the base or the cap, the FTS cap. The money, on the other hand, gets expended through sections. Has nothing to do with full-time equivalent students. The total cost for all sections is the critical piece of information on the expense side. The reason for that is all sections have instructors. The instructors cost the money. Okay, so when we're talking about sections, it's only important on the expense side, has no relevance in any way on the revenue side. The total enrollment, on the other hand, is the key component part. Total enrollment and total capacity are the critical numbers that we have to focus on. If a student is worried about whether they have access The FTS cap doesn't mean anything, and the sections don't mean anything. What means something is the enrollment. If the enrollment capacity of the organization drops, then the access that the students have to their education also drops. On the other hand, if the total enrollment increases, the access that students have to their classes increases. And it is that simple. That's one of the reasons why we need to change our descriptor, and we need to be focusing on total enrollment. That is what gives students the access to their classes. So hopefully this will help in terms of clarifying that. If anybody has any questions or comments, Danny?
Go ahead.
Well, then, just to make sure I understand, so then the idea is, well, we're looking at how many total students we take, or tell me how we operationalize this concept.
Well, we operationalize it by making sure that the students have seats that they can actually sit in for their classes. So it means that I hear Bob breathing.
I'm sorry. What it means is when Dr. Bell and the deans and the enrollment management folks meet and talk, and by extension when the deans meet with their faculty, that we want to talk more in terms of LGI, large group instruction classes, when we can mount them, more online, that again might be a form of LGI when we can mount them. And what we want to do is we want to find ways to maximize each FTS in terms of putting as many students into a class as can be done from an academic quality and academic integrity point of view. And when we discuss things like LGI, what interventions are needed, what support's needed for the faculty, that would assure a successful learning experience for the student. So it's really about trying to maximize the amount of that we have. Now, it won't be possible in every section, in every discipline, in every course, but it is possible, and we're now at a point where, from a budgetary point of view, it's a strategy that we need to employ in order to serve more students during a period of diminishing resources.
And I've got a graphic too that I'll show you in a minute that will also clarify that. So let me take Danny's question.
Just two quick things. One is the mention of only 428 students being affected. We had numerous teachers tell us that enrollment for those classes in the week before the semester started was frozen. So there was probably many more students that were trying to get into those classes that couldn't because they froze. Is that true or no?
I don't know the exact time. I think that it might have been 1 to 2 weeks prior, as we knew that we were getting to the point where we were going to have to make some decisions. So I don't remember the exact timing, but it might have been a week or two prior to that period for some of those sections. I know that at the time that the courses were canceled, it turned out there was an average of just under 10 or 9 point something students per section that were impacted, and on the 11 or 12, well, probably more like 15 that we'll add back, we'll be able to serve a much larger number of students, and of course, in relation to the completion agenda.
But you don't really know that because you guys cut off enrollment a week or two before people could enroll. So there could have been hundreds of people trying to get into those classes.
The other part of the equation, though, Danny, is that if you look at when sections fill, like organic chemistry, who knows when that fills? Is it in a day?
Like 1 to 3 days.
Okay, it fills instantly.
Yeah.
Okay, now, then you have the sections that really never do fill. What that tells you is that we're short on, because the law of supply and demand is fairly clear, that organic chemistry is in too short a supply, and some of these other ones that fill up at the absolute last minute are the ones that the students are basically using for fillers. They're really not the sections that the students want desperately. They've already filled up.
Well,
so the issue for us is that we have to focus on the sections that the students really need to have in order to be successful.
Right.
I think you're making some assumptions. But my point is that in the spirit of transparency, to say that it only affected 428 students when you cut off enrollment a week or two before is probably not completely honest.
Well, I wouldn't say that. The reality is that there were 428 students who were impacted no matter when we cut it out. In other words, the point is, since we cut it off, instead of it being 428 impacted, we stopped it from being 528 or 628 or 728 because we made the decision to cut when we cut, knowing that we would likely be looking at these.
But then you're dealing in pure hypotheticals.
Exactly.
Ed?
I can let you know that that I received lists from MIS showing enrollment at a certain point in the registration process for the fall. There were many classes that were 100% enrolled, but some of them were only showing, for example, 30% or even a smaller number. As in, for example, the case of the nursing classes, they were not filled, but that's because those students are guaranteed slots in the program. So frankly, they take their time registering for those classes. There were a few classes here and there that were low enrolled, meaning in the range of 30, 40, 50%. And for the most part, I could identify those classes as a counselor as elective classes, classes that are not needed, not essential for transfer or essential for degrees or certificates. So yeah, they were in the process of filling, but much slower than those classes that are in much greater demand.
Okay. Any other? Alex?
Just may I ask, the idea as well with the Spring Forward program is that there will be more than 428 students served out of that, correct?
That's correct. The Spring Forward program, basically what we're doing is in Spring Forward, we're offering, I think it's going to be 15 total classes, if you will, all high-demand classes for transfer completion and certificates. And these classes will fill the capacity. So in these 15 sections, with NCNs somewhere between, closing numbers somewhere between 30 to 35 students, we will in fact effectively serve more than the 426 students who were displaced at the time we did the cancellation.
Okay, so to be clear, and I want to say that Danny does bring up a good point. We will never know how many other students could have potentially signed up for these classes. We will never know that. But hopefully, from what I'm hearing from you, is that we will be able to serve more students that were at least directly affected through the Spring Forward program. And hopefully some of those students would have been those that were affected earlier as well.
Correct.
So let me just pass out this next graphic, which is a draft only because the program actually has not been fully developed in terms of the sections. But it graphically shows the same issue from a different perspective and from a budgetary perspective. So this shows two options. The 428 enrollments, 45 sections, had 9.5 students per section, would have cost about $120,000 for those. Option number two, 430 enrollments, 12 sections, 35.8 students per section, and it could cost us on the order of $50,000. The issue here is that it is possible to serve more students for significantly less money, and you can also see that the section count is utterly meaningless. So to say that in this example, and it is only an example, there are 33 fewer sections being offered, and yet the amount of the number of students that are being served has been increased, while simultaneously the budget has been reduced. This is a model for precisely how it is possible to go about next year to serve more students with fewer resources. It means that we have to concentrate on the sections that have higher demand. Kent?
This may have an enrollment management aspect to it, but in order to maximize the size of each of the sections, it's currently set by NCN, the normal closing number. That would have to be modified in order to allow it to go above that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a policy and procedure that has recently been implemented regarding large group instruction that basically states that either the instructor or the dean can work with the instructor to then develop a plan for large group instruction, which would then be forwarded to the Vice President of Instruction, and then the Vice President of Instruction would recommend or not recommend, but assuming that he recommended, he would then forward that to the President for approval. That would be a means of dealing with that. There's also discussion that we are beginning to enter into in terms of ways in which that we can allow faculty to go beyond the NCN if they so choose to do so. Now, those discussions are very preliminary. They're very fresh, and we're exploring that again with this notion of trying to basically, if an NCN is 35 and a classroom has seats for 40, and the faculty is so willing to go up to 40. But these are discussions that are tentative, and I know Dr. Bell is beginning to work on those.
Related to this question, something that has always been on my mind since I've been teaching 15 years now. Let's say I have a class that starts at 30, and at the census date, I still have 30. And then on week 9, week 10, that has dropped to 23, which effectively 7 students who I could have added at the beginning who would have done well are not able to get in because I don't have the seats. Is there any way, logistically, that we could get those students in place of the students who have dropped out? So again, increase access and maximize the access in our enrolled classes, especially the ones that are in high demand.
Dr. Bell?
There's a possibility of doing that, but there are 2 critical concerns you have with that. One is census. Obviously, our apportionment is marked where we are at census, and so that's why that's such a critical date. The other is from a standpoint of pedagogy, it's real difficult to say that a student who enters a class in a 16-week class, for example, who enters in week 5 or week 6 and completes, from an auditing standpoint, one of the quality assurances is, does that student who receives, for example, a B in a class, is that the same B for a student who was in there for term length? And so you begin to nudge into that gray area of overall quality if we start doing that.
And I think that there's one other thing too, is when we use the 25 Live scheduling program, it might be possible to add, have your section be taught in a larger classroom, okay, to where more people could be added. That is possible too. The issue is that we've got to be able to maximize and optimize the classrooms with the sections, so that, you know, if you were to start out with 35 instead of with 30, that you're going to end up at 30, and we will have served all the more students. You know, part of in the chart that Bob showed is that there are always students, and this doesn't represent necessarily failure on PCC's part. When you show the difference between access and success, there are always students who drop out for any number of reasons. They can drop out for health reasons, they can drop out for job reasons. There are any number of reasons that have nothing to do with the faculty, and they have nothing to do with our ability to control it. So you're never going to be able to completely bridge that gap. But what we can do is we can increase access, and then we can work on whatever success that we can work on. But I think it's possible for us to make better use of the resources that we have in order to even increase that student access number higher. Because in the end, there's almost nothing that stops that number from going up significantly, even next year, while we see the big drop in the budget.
One other thing, I think I agree with you, Bob, as far as the economy of an LGI. So it was my understanding that we cut a lot of the LGIs in winter session and for the spring. And if that's one of the most economical ways to do it, why did we do that?
Well, I think the simple answer to that is that there were other issues extant at the time relative to how we were mounting LGI sections that we had to get control of. So there was a temporary slowdown in the number of LGIs that were mounted for the period of the winter and in the spring. And in fact, in the spring, the deans that were affected actually could have put more on if they really wanted to, if they had brought that request. But there was just uncertainty. Now we have a very precise policy and procedure, and I would imagine that you will see more LGIs, or LGIs that existed, and more coming forward this summer and beyond.
Thanks.
And I do think that LGI is one of the greatest vehicles that we can utilize. If we can come up with a plan that works, it is one of the best ways that we can do exactly opposite of what most districts are doing, which is to reduce access for students.
But the critical thing is make sure we've got the right interventions and the right supports to make sure that it's done well.
Yeah,
We don't want to compromise that. And I know you don't either, but I just want to keep emphasizing that for students
Yeah,
and everybody
I
else.
want to make that very clear, in a lot of situations, I don't think LGIs are appropriate.
Exactly.
For educational purposes.
Right, exactly.
Any other comments? Okay, let me just shift gears here a second and talk about another concept that I would like to run past everybody. This is dealing with the year-end situations that we experience. And this is a proposal for, and I say it's a concept discussion, which is exactly what it is, of a way of standardizing how year-end funds are dealt with. It is important, and we'll get into that here in a minute in terms of what is likely to occur this year. Because 90% of our budget is wages, salaries, and benefits, you're going to find that 90% of our year-end surplus is also caused by wages, salaries, and benefits. Very often what happens is that people will resign or something occurs to their employment status during the course of the year. We budget for every single employee for the entire year. Now, we know that that's not going to happen. But we don't know who might resign. We don't know what anybody's specifically going to do. Therefore, everybody gets budgeted. During the course of the year, however, people leave. There are people, unfortunately, who die. There are people, who are promoted out or whatever occurs or moved to the classroom into a different slot, yet their budget remains behind for that year. That's one of the ways, and their benefits too, that's one of the ways that there is money left over at the end of the year. There are several choices for how to deal with that. We can actually build in some factor to where a manager cannot budget for each of their employees in a similar way that the airlines do, knowing that by the time that the flight takes off, not everybody's going to show up. Okay, well, we can do it that way, but that's kind of that'd be an unusual way of budgeting. On the other hand, we can also deal with what's left over at the end of the year for whatever reason. We never plan on having a budget surplus at the end of the year, but typically we do. So what this proposal would suggest is that if we agree and if we propose that whatever money is left over at the end of the year gets split up. And the suggestion is, now normally what will occur, and it's occurred here forever, is that money will go into a one-time fund. Okay, and typically it is the capital outlay fund. Lately it's been the capital outlay fund on the technology side. And in particular, the AIS system and technology upgrade, those two projects. Rather than putting all that money there, here's a proposal, is that half that money goes there. We still have those one-time needs, and we probably always will. Non-recurring employee, the idea there is it cannot go to a salary schedule because that's recurring. But on the other hand, it could go, for example, to an off-schedule raise. It could go to added benefits. There are any number of different ways for that to be handled, and that could all be negotiated. Cash reserve and cash flow. Okay, and I think that I managed to cut off the end by putting that in white. But the idea there is that as the state continues to withhold money from us, we have to continue to save money to cover for it. This year, we're expecting a $22 million deferral. Last year, we had about an $18.5 million deferral. So that's a $3.5 million increase in deferral that we now have to cover. So the idea is that we would create a fund specifically to handle that, and or it would be added on to the ending balance. And then the idea furthermore is that departments that save money and come in under budget, that we could come up with a mechanism to have that money carried over into projects or staff development or equipment or one-time type expenses that department could spend during the subsequent year, so that there's a benefit for all concerned to be saving money. It means that to the extent that the staff saves money, they will actually get money back. To the extent that the department saves money, the department would get money back. In any event, we'd be able to fund the one-time expenses and increase our cash flow and reserves. So, Ben, you got your hand up?
Yeah, after you finish.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
I guess my thinking focuses around process and timing. You used the example of a person may resign for various reasons, and that's true. So I'm thinking, so let's say a person leaves, so this is 12, 11, 12. So let's say we're in a 12, 13 year. So let's say a person leaves in April of 2013. But there is a plan to fill the position in the 13, 14 year, say November. Will that money be swept because we've not filled that position, say by July 1 or
Well,
August 1 or?
What I'm suggesting.
That's what I mean by timing and
What I'm
process.
suggesting is that in the past, the concept of sweep meant that it all went into basically the capital outlay fund. What I'm suggesting is that it no longer be swept, that it be reallocated into these 4 different areas. So the answer is yes, it would be reallocated. However, it'd be refunded again in that subsequent year.
Okay, but
But
do
it'd
we
be-
run a risk? So it's like, okay, if I lose if a position is vacant in my department, but I'm not gonna fund it until November, same scenario. The money is, the position, the money that was funded for that position goes into one of these 4 funds. But basically what you said is that it will be refunded. Do we run the risk that there may not be enough money to refund it?
That's true.
So I guess I'm putting out on the table, how would that then impact an individual's department unit? There is going to cause a major rush then to fill the position on July 1.
Why?
Because if I know I run the risk of losing the money to not be able to fund it in November, then I won't try to get it filled in July.
Right, except for the
Although
fact.
I don't need the person in July. Are you following what I'm saying, sir? I'm not just talking about HR, I'm just talking about process and timing,
Right.
that's all.
But the mechanism actually, you've created an artificial deadline that doesn't exist. It's the budget cycle that funds positions. Whether that position be filled in July or in November ultimately doesn't matter. The reality is that there are going to be 2 reasons at least for you to wait until November if you can wait till November. The 2 reasons are that you'd get 10% of the money back in any event carried over, and the second reason is that we would distribute that money to employees. Therefore, to the extent that you don't need to have a position filled, don't. In the end, there will be more money left over. So what will occur is that at the beginning of the budget cycle, July the 1st, although in reality it's more like September the 15th because of the way the state does its budgeting, you're going to request that that position be refilled. And you're going to have to compete against everyone else too who needs to have positions filled. Therefore, there's no automatic that says that if a position's vacant, that it gets refilled. Part of restructuring an organization is that you have to update, and you've got to find out where the new positions are required. In this case, for example, with the web. Well, 15 years ago, we didn't have the problem with the web because the web didn't exist. Whereas now it does, and therefore we need people. But on the other hand, there are going to be other things that we don't need anymore. We used to have an entire crew that used to take projectors and overhead slide projectors and all that kind of stuff to classrooms. Well, in the meantime, we don't need those things anymore because there's technology that handles that. So each budget cycle, a person will have to re-request that a position that was previously vacated be filled. Frankly, the same thing will occur with positions that have incumbents in them. So to the extent that that job is not required, then we'll find another position for them.
Yeah, I'm just raising something that is just in my belly button barometer is going like this here. I think, just off the top of my head, if I know what you said is going to occur, I'm not going to wait till November to fill a position. I'll compete in July. You know,
But I think what he's saying is that if your person leaves in April,
right.
whatever money you don't expend to June 30th gets swept into this account, or it's in this account, and then gets dispersed
right.
by these
Understood that part,
percentages.
right.
And then assuming you got that position re-upped for the next year in the budget, then even the money between July 1 and November is money that is not going to get expended, would be left over at the end, that again would be dispersed again. So it would be to your advantage in a way to wait. There's no reason to hurry it, because you're going to get, well, a percentage of the money, not the full amount.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, you're only going
Okay,
to get.
because I was
right.
budgeted full
Yeah.
amount here.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me I'm only going to be budgeted for 10% here.
Well, yeah, they're only going to give you
No.
10%.
Well, right now, you don't get any of it.
You don't get any of it now.
Yeah, well, right now, yeah,
That's the
they just
point.
take it all.
Get swept, so.
That's right, that's the point I'm making. I'm just raising something that some people might think, that's all.
This is a particular interest of yours, Danny, so I'm interested what you think.
Well, it's an improvement. But I'd need some more time to go through it and see, I mean, the percentages, I'm not really sure about the percentage and stuff, but.
Well, the percentages are arbitrary, of course.
Yeah. I mean,
And I know what that other one says, by the way, because obviously,
20%.
it says 20%.
Yeah.
The one that slides off the green pie.
Oh, okay.
I just need to move that over. Okay, conceptually, does anybody else, and we have shared governance people here, so I'm interested to hear. Classified?
Well, I do have a question.
Uh-huh.
Say, for example, that what we were talking about, the employee leaves, and you have that money already budgeted for that person. Can you take that money and move it into another account to pay, say, for example, hourly people to cover that position?
Yes.
Okay. That's my question.
However, part of what we're trying to do is, in the face of declining resources, to the extent that a position doesn't have to be filled, don't. Because ultimately, you know, when you see the red line falling off the bottom of the chart, that is going to be painful. And we keep saying that it cannot be business as usual, and it can't be. What we're trying to do too, though, is while we're preserving access for students, which is the top priority in all accounts, we have to save whatever we can save in order to get by. This creates an incentive. Now, if you were to ask purchasing department, what happens starting in about April, is that people start blowing money. And they're afraid that if they don't blow it, they're going to lose it. And the trend line is fairly significant. And there's a lot of sentiment on campus that you have to do that. Don't lose your budget. Okay, what we're trying to do is to incentivize people to not do that. Because to the extent that there's money left over at the end of the year, we're all better off. And we're trying to incentivize both the department and all people on the campus. It's like if you see a light on, turn it off. At the end of the year, if there's money left over, 20% of it, in this scenario, would go to employees. And, you know, that occurs through, like I said, an off-schedule raise. It'd be non-recurring, and I don't want to use the term bonus because but it feels like a bonus. It's an off-schedule raise. That you get 20% of what we save, and then hopefully everybody will be on board with trying to save all the money that we can.
Right. But again, I think the percentages are probably, I mean, if you want to really incentivize them, right now, you're taking 70% of it is either going to reserve or capital outlay, where 100% of it right now is going there. But that may need to be increased if you really want to incentivize people. Otherwise, it's, look, if you had $50,000 and you're told, well, you're going to get 10% back to your department, that means you get 5,000 back if you save the 50. No,
Well, and hopefully people are concerned enough about the health of the organization. I know, for example, that Dwayne's projects of the AIS is not funded. Okay, we do not have the money to finish that project yet. I think we have $7 million, just shy of $7 million, and how much is it going to cost, Dwayne?
Over a 5-year period, could be close to 11.
Okay, so we need another $4 million for the AIS system, and that's not all technology upgrades yet either. That doesn't upgrade all the classrooms and so forth. The fact is that there are one-time needs that the district has that we have to fund. Right now, we do take 100% of it and put it there. This is trying, and frankly, there's nothing magical about these numbers. So if in future years we find out that it's not enough for capital outlay or that it's too much or whatever, these numbers can be adjusted. The point is that if we can come up with an agreement and a recommendation to move forward, that this is, because we will have this situation now at the end of July. One way or another, you know, after the books have closed and all the adjustments are made, we're going to end up finding out how we ended the year. Sadly, we find out well after the year's ended, but that's the way that the system works because of the year-end adjustments. But this is a way of clearing it all up to where we agree on a principle of how we can handle it.
But there is always an excess, right? I mean, of about 5 million.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And I
So-
couldn't
so
be
the re-
happier
But the
that it is.
reports that we've been living beyond our means and beyond our budget just apparently aren't completely accurate.
No, I think that the issue is that the FTS and the sections don't line up. That part, we're living beyond our means. The fact is that the savings that have been occurring are basically out of vacancies and so forth, of not expending money on people. That's basically how it takes place. It's, you know, or it'll occur because this year, presumably, because of the LED lights, we will spend less in electricity. I hope that we do. The other day, the board approved that we move forward with a fuel cell. That will save us $140,000 to $250,000. Okay, so there are ways of us trimming. Every amount of money that we save benefits us, and to the extent that it ends up in this year-end reallocation, redistribution, is good for all of us. And we're trying to spread the wealth is essentially how it works.
No, and I'm glad there's an excess. I think the perception is out there that we've been spending more than we've been receiving for at least the last 5 years every year, and that we've used up our savings.
No, I think that we haven't been spending as wisely as we could be. And
Well,
I think
that may be even more accurate, but.
And I think that the mission that we now have is that, you know, fairly much that party is over. Because when we get to the $6.5 million crunch on top of what we've already done, you know, we really have to bear down. Tom?
This is a thought about saving money. With the number of course sections that were canceled, and assumedly we're going to cancel low enrolled courses, does that free up a lot of classrooms that actually the rest of the people in the U building, those courses could be scheduled elsewhere on campus and not have to purchase or rent the bungalows for the Science Village?
There are, I believe, 38 bungalows that will comprise, that we have already purchased for the Science Village. Many of those are laboratories too, so part of the issue for the Natural Sciences Division is to keep the classrooms and the labs in some proximity too. However, there are other issues that we have yet to resolve too, of matching available classrooms in the best fit with sections. Okay, and that really does help to have greater flexibility. It's
I just thought that, you know, was there all of a sudden, you know, classrooms that weren't being used all day long now because of sections canceled, that other things could be scheduled in there?
Okay, we heard from classified management. Kent or John? In regard to,
I certainly like the idea of being incentivized. You know, the concern I think management might have would be that when you have vacancy and you move, disencumber those funds, you put them elsewhere with the general pot. The fear is that if there really is the money there, that we might have to struggle with getting that position back. And that would be the concern, even if the money is there, and that would be, I think, the concern for us to replace the people that we truly need, and then if it's disencumbered and gone, then it's like, well, what happened to it? And then we'd have to argue and fight to get that position back, even though that the money might be there somewhere in the general fund, but it's kind of muddled up because you can't really identify it as, that was my position money.
but in the end, the encumbering and disencumbering functions do not occur through the year-end reallocation. An encumbrance occurs when we set up the budget and fund each full-time employee. Those funds are encumbered. When the person leaves, even if you don't disencumber, the money is left over at the end of the year. So the encumbering, disencumbering doesn't impact what's left over. The issue then comes about of whether you get that position back next year or the following year. And in the process, I think that we've had too much of a knee-jerk reaction of replacing. So this year, I think that we're down 25% on the managers. Okay, well, it doesn't mean that those management positions will ever be replaced. But to the extent that they should be replaced, they need to be replaced. And I think that it comes down to a prioritization that must occur each time, so that when the budget is established for a subsequent year, that you see all the vacant positions, and irrespective of what we've done in the past, what is required to do in the future. So if Dwayne says, I need to have another web developer because it's not possible to keep up, which he has said, then it doesn't matter what we used to do in the past, we need to fund that. So each year, I think it's a healthy process and a regenerative process that you have to each year examine how the 90% of our resources are deployed. But in any event, that doesn't impact this.
I think that would be the concern, though, about for many people or many departments would be that process by which you go through the prioritization of positions for each of this. You know, so if Dwayne, you needed a web designer, but I also needed someone, then there should be a process that's pretty clear that we know why you need it, why I need it, why anyone else needs that, and figure out who would go first, second, or third.
And I think that what I'm going to propose is that we're going through right now a process of which positions have to be filled right away. And what I'll do is next time I will distribute what we are going to fill immediately. It'll be a handful of positions, but I'll distribute that.
You know, one of the things that we did, that I did this past year in this process, I've had a couple resignations or folks that have left, that the positions were still left in the budget. And so I took a look at those, and actually, particularly for supporting the academic side in Jim Arnwine's area for video production, while we had this vacancy, why are we going, I mean, what type of person do we need to really have in that? And so we really revisited that decision, and actually have now going back and refilling that as a video engineer that was described by the academic side of the house as something that would be highly needed for that area. We had the same thing with a clerk position in our office that left as well, and so we put those back on the table. That says, first of all, do I really need that position? And I think this is an important process that we have to go through. Do I really need that position? And we discussed that, certainly, amongst the executive committee that says, well, this is back on the table. While I may have a priority for it, is my priority higher than Bob's priority? And frankly, we agree that no, okay, then fine, there's the position, take it. And we deal with those in that sort of way. And I think that's the kind of, and I look at that within my own division too, that says, why do you really think you need that? Is there another way we could address that by either restructuring some things or, taking a different approach with how to support it? So I think that's a big part of this process that we really need to approach it very candidly. And those funds, wherever those funds go, we're all on the same team, and I think it's important that we function that way. And so here it is, it's back on the table, and there'll come a time that I know that I may need a resource as well that I don't have. And so that's where we get back to this type of process where we prioritize that.
If I can share another thing. Did somebody else have their hand up? I think, and I agree with what Dwayne is talking. He's talking about a staffing decision tree that we need to kind of really ask the hard questions to ourselves and be honest with ourselves and not worry about just filling it because it's vacant. I think then the incentive we have here, how do we cause the department to really go think about those things that you said, and I've been also talking about in the past about, you don't have to fill it because it's vacant. You need to first ask a whole bunch of questions as to basically what you were saying. But how do we get that mindset change And it is through some incentive. So maybe we look at the percentage at the bottom, 10% per rata to underspending departments. Maybe that percentage needs to be larger. And then it may cause the department heads to really ask those kind of hard questions. Do I really need this position? Or can I have a different model?
Okay. Students, Danielle.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for my turn because I want to switch gears. I'm pleased with the idea of having this broken down allocation of the year-end surplus because I did experience a lot of negative, and I was there last year when we swept about, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 4 million. It was just about when I was getting into my position, so I was still kind of shaky on that. However, it was not very well taken from the student point of view, considering that winter was on the chopping block during that period too. So I'm very pleased with this. What I will like to see is maybe if there's an addition of a pie here, I'd like to see something along the lines of the graduation fund as far as the surplus comes around. Because I don't know if the idea of the graduation fund is going to be a permanent idea or it's going to be a this year type of idea. But if there's some sort of pie that's going to be set specifically for the allocation towards classes that, based on the year, if we were able to get that data from the prior year to fund high demand classes for the next year, that would be very appreciated from the student point of view, as far as, because I see employees, I see cash reserve, outlay, which are, important subjects, but as well as funding those at least graduation/transfer oriented classes would be great to see some sort of percentage allocated for that.
And I think the current thinking is the graduation fund would be perpetual.
Okay, so if there's like a pie that would be like donation to the graduation fund?
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the community more involved so that corporations and other people can contribute too. So that's the mechanism that we're trying with the graduation fund.
Right.
I think that we always have a requirement of us to offer the correct sections. So that means to offer, keep the enrollment up, to eliminate low enrolled sections, to add more high demand sections, and to continually reblend the courses that we're offering in order to maximize the resources. So
Right.
I think that's true in any event. If we were to have half the money we did, we'd still have to go through that process.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here. Faculty? Haven't heard from Dustin, I don't think.
I want to agree with the last comment. I do think that some of this money left over should be going into high-demand sections. It seems to be why we're here in the first place. And so I think that should be a very high priority, and so I would second that comment that was just made.
Okay. Anybody, Tom?
It does seem like so much of this is coming down to what courses are offered, high demand, the ones that are gonna fill the seats, and, the diagram you gave us here. There's a committee that's working on this, right? At some point, can we ask them to come and give us a report on what's happening with that?
Ed, I think you're talking about enrollment management. And, yeah, so we would be happy to come at the appropriate time and give a report on what the directions that we're going and what
When
have
do
you.
you think you're going to be far enough along to do that?
I suspect it within, in about a month?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so in a month, we'll agendize the enrollment management.
It just seems like that's such a huge component
is.
of, the money that.
It absolutely
we
is.
just know how that's proceeding.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, let me switch gears again. Let me talk about funding, another concept of how to fund the district. There are several possible ways of doing this. I suppose, in theory, there are an infinite number. You'll see that these numbers are just numbers that I slapped together, with the exception of the one big one, which is 50%. 50% is a legal requirement. So what this is basically an apple cutter, where you set up a model with the blades in a certain spot, and whatever amount of money we get from the state, we set our budget at 103 million, basically you slice it this way. Now, 50% of our money will go to in-class expense. That's a requirement. No matter what else happens, that needs to be 50%, or a little bit better for insurance purposes. Then, in this case, and I essentially took numbers that were roughly correct. Non-instructional faculty, basically it's librarians and it's counselors, plus their benefits, by the way. Then classified employees, 29%, and again, you'll notice that benefits is not a part of this equation. What I've done is I've worked the benefits into these pie pieces. Management, 5%, operations, 10%, and supplies, 2%. Whatever numbers we come up with, it is possible that if we establish this funding model, that whatever the number is that comes in, this is how the money gets distributed. Now, on the one hand, that makes things very clear-cut. Everybody will know in advance of how the money is split. And then it comes down to, we have to work out, for instance, with the classified, which positions are filled and which ones are not. Or within the in-class, the 50%, which sections are taught and which ones are not. That's a separate discussion. But we know, and who teaches them, but we know how much money it needs to tally up to. It's, to me, a clear-cut way of setting instant goals of how it needs to be. And, while there can be adjustments, that if, as Dwayne said, somebody says, hey, you know what, I really need such and such desperately, and someone else is willing to give up money for it, that we can cover that. But as a guideline, that we can instantly apply a formula to the money and just to distribute it. So I'm interested in comments on that original concept, and then I'll get into how we could do dollar-based budgeting as well as a subcomponent of this.
I have a question. If this is a proposed model, correct? How
Not
is...
the numbers, the concept.
Right. How is it currently? If you could just give me a broad stroke of how the monies are allocated currently.
Well, this is roughly correct.
Okay.
But
So it's still
this
per
is not how we do
percentages?
budgeting.
What's the difference, basically?
This is how it turns out. So this is the outcome. This is not the incoming goal of how we distribute.
Okay.
So last year, and I said last time that last year we had a budget of something like $118 million. Next year we'll have about $105 million, something like that, round numbers. Which means that the pie shrank. As the pie shrinks, all the component parts can shrink. It means that we have to become more efficient. It means we have to do more with less. But it doesn't mean that one of these aspects gets out of kilter with the others. It means that we've already established what the basic ratio should be between the different funding expenditure categories. What do you think?
The 50% class, that's a legal requirement,
That
correct?
is.
Yeah, okay.
And you can't count the non-instructional faculty, which is strange because it's really a remnant of K through 12 that we get caught up in through K through 14, unfortunately, because the concept that counselors and librarians cannot be considered as a part of instruction is in a college environment nonsensical. Now, I understand in a high school why they would do that, but I do not understand in a college why you would force that. But in any event, the non-instructional faculty cannot be considered as a part of the 50%.
Rick, can you describe for us operations? Can you give us what's in there?
Yeah, it's, and I called it operations for lack of anything else to call it, but it includes electricity, it includes consulting, it includes, everything else.
So, for example, our temporary hourly people are in that, or where are they?
No, they're actually in the classified.
In classified?
Yes.
Okay. So that's important to know.
And it should be classified, unclassified. I
Classified,
suppose.
unclassified.
Right.
So I'm sorry, somebody have their hand
Oh,
up.
go ahead.
Yeah, so programs like professional development or the realignment project that's going on right now, that would fall in like in the operations kind of stuff.
Well, the consulting expenses would, but you'll see that, and it's not exactly correct, but if you were to add the 5% for managers and the 29 for classified, the 4 for non-instructional faculty, 50%, you'll see that that tallies up to apparently 88%. So it's 1% off.
Okay.
The operations, the 10%, the supplies at 2%, that's everything that's left over.
Okay.
So gasoline for the vehicles, for the shuttle fleet, that's operations. Electricity, I mean, there are just thousands of small items that are included in all of that. Okay, let me just describe the other way that this can work, is that once you've established what the budget is, and let me deal with the instructional side with that 50%. It is possible for us to start with the FTS and how much money we're going to get. That can then be divvied up into various different divisions of how many FTS each division needs to produce. So if we need to produce in round numbers 20,000 FTS, and if we determine that math needs to produce 3,000, English 4,000, and I have no idea how many health sciences, but say it's 1,000, I have no idea. And you divvy all that up and you come up with the number that we need to hit. Then what we can do is we can split up to the 50%, and we can say that, now in round numbers, let's say it's $20,000 and let's say we get 100 million. That would mean that we would have $2,500 per FTES as the piece of this pie, right? So therefore, if health sciences needs to go through one more filter, which is the cost per, because health sciences is significantly higher cost than social sciences. We take it through that filter, and then we can attribute how much money each division gets. And it actually occurs through a formula as opposed to, some subjective series of steps. Or worse yet, what we did the current or the previous year. That's how it is possible to make this so formula-driven and planning-driven that there's not going to be too much argument in the budget development process, because everybody's going to understand how it works. Right now, all the money kind of goes into a black box, and then kind of after a little while and a certain amount of noise and smoke, the budget book comes out, right? Mm-hmm. This is a process of trying to make that far more formula-driven.
Could you, you mentioned the one more filter, the cost per whatever. Could you go into that in a little more detail so I can understand?
Yeah, we can develop historical data that, for example, health sciences might cost us $8,000 per FTS, whereas, and these are made-up numbers, but they're going to be in the ballpark somewhere. Whereas social sciences is probably in the order of $1,800 per FTS. And I think those two probably represent the two extremes. So English, one of the questions is, would English need more than $2,000 per FTS? In essence, they're subsidizing health sciences, because health sciences is restricted to 12 students in a lot of their sections, right? Okay, and therefore, pardon?
10.
Okay, therefore it's far more expensive to put on those sections. By balancing that out, we can come up with a formula again to where if you're working in math, you need to have $2,000. And if you have to produce 4,000 FTS, then your budget is $8 million. Does that make sense?
So you're basically looking historically at what it has cost to provide sections in different departments.
And then what can happen is that if we decide that we need to emphasize a certain area or de-emphasize another area, or if somebody comes forward and says we need more money in order to do health sciences now, or we can do with less money, that those numbers can be tweaked for the subsequent year.
I want to just so everybody knows, because those numbers, that number sounds terrible. We have 60 to 80 students in our theory course in the lecture. It's the clinical, when you go to you take them to the hospital, that's where we have to have the low number. So our lecture course is quite large, but it's this clinical courses that are 60.
Well, I wasn't picking on you, I'm just saying.
But I thought, when I said that, out 10, I thought.
And they're small by accreditation requirements, too. It's not something we choose to do, it's something we're required to do in many respects.
Yes.
But other
The hospital
divisions-
won't let you come in with
Exactly.
30 students. on
Other divisions have to subsidize health sciences in order for us to be able to, as an institution, offer health sciences. That's another nuance that a lot of people don't realize. But I think that if we can come up with these formulae, that it's possible for everybody to see, and everybody understand them, and everybody know how the budget was developed.
And I think it's important to say, it's not going to be a perfect science. It's just going to be a way to begin to get a handle on what actual expenses are tied to certain programs, and then we look at the outcomes of those programs and the number of students who get degrees and transfers and certificates and what have you, and we just begin, because right now it is kind of a big black box, smoke and mirrors kind of process.
Not smoke and mirrors.
Just
Smoke and noise.
Just smoke and noise. Sometimes mirrors too, but that's...
Smoke and mirrors is a whole nother deal.
That's true.
Are these percentages, so say we were to adopt such a formula-driven way of budgeting, are the percentages going to be, what's the word, looked over on a yearly basis
Yes.
based on the results? Okay, so it's
Yes.
not like a set number.
That's a good
No, and what we're really trying to do is we've got to do a far better job of tying planning in with the budget. Okay, and there has to be discussion at the Budget Resource Allocation Committee each year of, these are the allocations per division. And does it need to be adjusted?
Yeah.
And if not, then it's adopted, and that's what we use in the subsequent budget year. It creates a far more set of defined criteria that will establish the future budget.
And the Institutional Effectiveness Committee is now in the process, it's getting itself geared up, it's working very well, it's doing program reviews. And part of that process is to based upon very specific rubrics, to review the programs that are submitted to them by the faculty, then get into a continuous cycle of improvement situation. That's a form of planning, and at some point, the output of the IEC would be tied to the planning, the budget allocation process, and then from an accreditation point of view, we have evidence to show that we are actually doing that, and this is another model. And I'd be honest with you, Rick, I have no idea if this is going to work or not, but I think it's a way to at least take a look at it, and I think Danielle was right. Every year, we just sort of see if it's working or not working, and we tweak with it. But it's just another way of beginning to address it with limited resources.
Well, I'm trying to come up with a model that people can actually see how it works.
Yeah.
Because right now, it is a very, very difficult process to even explain. And it's largely tied up in the current form by our technology system. And there are very few people in the world who can explain how that budget book is put together. It is so inside the computer right now. And everybody hopes that that thing doesn't break. Because if it does, we're pretty much up the creek.
No, I agree. I like this. I think it's, to kind of piggyback on what Bob is saying, I think people understand what falls in this category. For example, I was thinking, okay, the educational master plan has 14 actions. People are asking for money to accomplish whatever action they're responsible for. If I want to understand, this is the budget process, does it fall under operations, supplies, where does it fall, kind of stuff. So I think if it's clear what these things mean in real easy terms, I think that people would grasp the whole concept a lot easier.
Well, and this is the initial blush at it.
Yeah.
Because I want to at least have a discussion about the overall concept. It's a lot of work to develop this, but I'd like to develop this in from the general to the specific. The general concept is the one that I've outlined. This is a lot of work to then redefine this and to derive the formula.
Yeah, well, my only concern would be, this is looking at it completely from budgetary process, not from the educational process. So, I don't know how it's going to turn out. So,
I don't either.
but discussing it is fine.
Dustin?
I like the idea, I just want to throw a potential worst-case scenario out there and see if this could be potentially a problem. If this information is published out there and the campus sort of sees it, is there a potential danger of people feeling resentful if they find out that health sciences is getting a lot more than their own division? And so therefore, they would need, basically, it would really need to be explained clearly that there are federal regulations out there that require this higher number of dollars going to that division. But again, I'm assuming that most people would understand that like health sciences have different rules, but I can imagine maybe some people will be wondering why they get so much more money.
Well, but I think it's a healthy discussion to have. Right now, all those numbers are in the budget. You can figure them out. You can do a little math to find them, but you can find them. So it's not like it doesn't currently exist. What we're trying to do is to make the process far more transparent. Now, the other truth is that some divisions are far more efficient than others. Okay, and it poses the question in terms of institutional effectiveness, why can't Division X be as efficient as Division Y? And I think that there are probably reasons for it, but there might not be. And I think that in the process of improving the institution, you have to look at best practices. And I think that we have divisions in this campus that do best practice, and I think we have others that are lagging behind. And I think that it's a healthy process every year to have to go through this. I personally believe that there are a few things as healthy as a budget crisis in forcing change that otherwise is unpalatable. Nobody looks forward to it, except, when we come out of this process stronger, we need to be grateful for the fact that we went through it. And this is a part of growing pains. But growing pains means that in the end, you're better. So I will continue to develop that if that's okay by everybody. And I might come up with a graphic of what the different divisions cost as well per FTS so that we can see that. Okay? Now, shifting gears one more time, we were going to talk about the current budget and the subsequent budget. And I know that we were going to ask fiscal for a report, and they've developed some preliminary data. However, there's an anomaly that we have yet to understand. And let me just describe briefly the anomaly. Last time we talked about $19.3 million being in the distributed reserve for an adjunct. And that we thought that we would track under that number. The anomaly that we have to figure out is for some reason June is 2 or 3 times higher in expenses for a draw on that distributed reserve. And we cannot explain that anomaly yet, and I think in the next week we need to take a run at it. I'll give you an example here for, let's see here, this is 2010-11, and let me take a number that would be reasonable. March had a draw on that fund of $120, almost $5,000. April was $156,000, May was $158,000, June was $479,000.
I'm sorry, which fund was this again?
This is the distributed reserve on the adjunct. What we do is,
That's the hourly classified.
it's hourly classified?
Hourly.
So, but why is it
Classified
double? Do we know that, or triple?
No, that's again what we're
Okay,
trying to look for.
All right, sorry.
Classified or certificated?
No,
Classified.
she's saying, yeah, I misspoke. It's classified. So we're trying to find out where these pockets of money lie, but there's an anomaly in June for some reason.
Yeah, I guess
That we
so.
can't figure out yet. So we need another week or so to see if we can get to the bottom of that. Now,
Late time sheets.
I will also, in the handout that I just passed out, 2011-12, because we're into basically the middle of the spring semester, it's not like there are a lot of changes that we can make here. Therefore, what we have to do is we've got to be able to find little bits of money here and there, or larger bits of money. And the big area, again, because this happens every year, is salaries and benefits for particularly vacant positions. In this case, I think that we will be able to find $1 million in unfilled positions. That occurs for 2 reasons. It occurs because there's going to be about almost $400,000 left over from CERP 2, which was the mid-year, the December, and I think that there will be something probably on the order of $800,000 or $900,000 left from the positions that we intended to fill this current year after CERP 1 that so far we have not filled. So we funded 22 faculty positions. We funded $1 million of other positions. We have spent very little of that money, though in the next number of months we will spend some of it because we're starting to be incapable of operating in some of our areas. So that's why I put $1 million for unfilled positions. CERP 2 and unused adjunct pay is probably another $1 million. We have to define that better. What it means is that right now we're probably looking at an $850,000 gap. And what I'm going to ask each of the managers to do is to look in their areas to see what pockets of money they might be able to find. And then if they can report back that to see how much that $850 we can fill. And we'll keep developing these other ones for the unfilled and the unused adjunct pay. With each passing month, we've got a far better idea of how we're going to land June the 30th. At this point, there are still some anomalies that we have to work out. So that gives you a sense of where we're headed in terms of proposing to this committee how we cover the $2.85 million. Are there any questions on the 11-12 first?
Can you explain what you mean by the reductions in salaries and benefits for vacant positions?
Well, that just means that we do a budget cut to cover that $2.85 million.
So these are not employees having their
No,
salaries cut?
No, only for vacant, only for vacant positions.
Okay, thank you.
So reductions in salaries, benefits for vacant, and let me write budget reductions, does that help?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put in budget reductions. No, we're not talking about vacant, positions that have incumbents. Any other questions on 11-12? Okay, 12-13, realize that there will be an additional $6.5 million on top of the 2.85, on top of the 2, on top of the 6 that we had last year. These are cumulative cuts. So it's not like we can take the 2.85 and those cuts will have an impact on the 6.5. They won't.
No. I just got a question, because what I read was it was $5 million. So I'm just curious where we came up with the 6.5.
Well, the answer, it was actually 5.1 and change, I think. But the answer is because this year we also took $1.3 million out of the dental fund that we can't do again.
And the 5.1 and change is the 1,050 FTES
Yes.
times the $4,600, and it's about 5.1 million.
Right.
Sorry, say that one more time.
The 1,050 FTES that we are going to be reduced times approximately $4,600 per FTS, and that's about $5.1 million.
Okay.
So these are cumulative cuts. Every year builds on the bad news of the last year. Okay, so when we're looking at the 6.5, it does involve structural change. I keep saying that you can cut so much fat, but then you're out of fat. We have to keep re-examining how we do business. Okay, that involves structural changes. That means that we have to change, the essence of what we do and how we do it. Keeping in mind what we started out the conversation is that the access for the students is the #1 priority, and our current plan is that we will do that, and we will cut the budget at the same time. That's a matter of, we don't know quite how we're going to do it, but we know we are. So the potential changes include the Carnegie schedule, the trimester schedule, and just so that everybody's clear on the very concept, because the idea is that we'd cut the winter intersession. That's not what the idea is. The idea is that the spring semester starts earlier and the winter follows the spring, is essentially what happens. Increase enrollment, reduction of the sections while increasing the enrollment, which is what the chart showed before. Increases on the revenue side, and I keep saying this too, the best way for us
charged because of capital outlay, then that portion must go to the capital outlay and the rest goes to the general fund?
That goes to capital outlay, right?
Capital outlay goes to Fund 41.
Right. Only that portion.
Only that
though.
portion that is so labeled.
Right. This last year, that number decreased, the capital outlay
Yeah,
number,
but for next fall, I think we increased it compared to.
because of the Center for the Arts. That number fluctuates, and each year, we make a proposal to the board of what to charge for non-resident tuition, and then the board approves that number. But ultimately, you do have to pay attention to what the local colleges are doing with that. And you don't want to get too far ahead, and you certainly don't want to be too far behind.
I wanted to ask a similar question with respect to, I keep calling this corporate ed, and I'm not really, it's like a continuing ed or corporate ed. Does all of those funds, if we're offering particular courses or workshops to local businesses, do those funds stay 100% for us as well?
100%.
Because everywhere I've been, those have been very positive revenue generating strategies. So I was kind of curious where that was from a percentage standpoint. Thank you.
It's one of those revenue generators that we have to focus on.
Right.
Yeah, two quick questions on the F1s. Number one, it sounded like you were just discussing, is there a certain percentage of how those fees, those F1 fees are, because you said a certain amount was allocated to capital outlay?
Yes. And that's driven by your actual expenditure on capital outlay. The idea is that if you're out of state, the in-state capital outlay is paid for either by the state government or in our case by the bond. The theory is that if you're out of state, you have to pay your fair share. And what they do then is they basically have to pay a percentage or a fee for the capital outlay that they themselves are enjoying.
So
But
it's, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So is that the only, there's a certain percentage then of those F1 visa
A
fees?
certain dollar amount, not percentage. But
Oh,
yeah.
okay, so a certain dollar, and what is that dollar amount?
I don't remember this year, but it's relatively small, $15.
I can give that to Danny later, so we
Yeah.
can see both years.
Yeah.
if he
Okay.
wants to do that.
So and that changes every year?
It changes every year,
Based on?
based on how much money we actually spent on capital outlay.
Okay. And then secondly, how many F1 visa students did we have this year as opposed to last? I know it was 200 more, but what's the number?
And it seems like it was, I'm not sure if it was F1s or you were talking about non-resident, right, Bob? It was something like 1,500 versus 1,250 or something? For what? For non-resident?
Oh, in what regard?
What's the current gross number of non-residents? Is it 1,500 or something, 1,600?
I'm trying to remember it's somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000, but it's not a huge number. In other words, the F1 visas, I believe, are around 1,200, 1,300 now, Bob,
That's
as I
correct.
recall.
I think
So
it's-
it's
I think-
whatever a number of out-of-state are on top
We
of
can
that.
find out what that number is, though.
Yeah, I always keep in my head the F1 number and.
We're
and-
about 1,250 F1 visa
Yeah.
students, if you will, / international students. And then out-of-state students would be on top of that.
And how many out-of-state roughly?
That I do not know.
Yeah, that's not.
Can we just get that?
Yeah, we'll get those
Yeah,
precise
yeah.
numbers.
Great, thanks.
And then can you provide a historical track of that?
That would
Because
be
we
good.
have
Yeah.
increased in the last year, I do
Yeah,
know that.
absolutely.
And we're spending money, because if you recall, last budget cycle, we said that we needed to juice up the revenue generation side.
And do we have projections of what we think we're going to have next year? I mean, roughly?
On what?
Out-of-state
F1s?
tuition, F1s and out-of-state, both, either or?
Well, I know that go ahead, Bobby.
No, we're in the process of sitting in those kind of things. One of the things we need to definitely on the mind, we have to have all the infrastructure in place to support our F1 visa students. A lot of those things are housing and all of those other components that they need. So it's part of the planning process, and we're finalizing that now. So we'll have, probably in about maybe a month or so, a relative target number for for F1 visa next year, and that will show how much we plan to increase from this current year to next year.
Okay, so can you bring that to the committee when it's ready?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay? Good so far? All right, and if, Dwayne, can you just update us on where we are with the AIS?
Currently, the RFQ, or the request for qualification, ended on January the 31st. There were 5 vendors that had proposed solutions to PCC. We reviewed those proposals. We have selected 3 vendors to come to campus. These are week-long demonstrations of the functionality that was put together by the college community and provided as part of Strata's input to some of this functionality so that we didn't have to create everything from scratch. The week of March 26th will be campus management and Workday. They will be coming to, they actually have about 70% of the for-profit higher education market with respect to administrative information systems. That whole week will be demonstrations by them. Then the week of April the 9th will be Oracle's PeopleSoft application. Again, an entire week. All of this, by the way, will be on the web if it's not already. And then the week of April 23rd, I think I got it right. That will be Datatel, SunGuard Higher Education combined. The two companies will be demonstrating the Banner product solution set. So what we will, these will be open to the entire college community as part of that process. The location is over in the, something called the GM building. Again, we will have all of the details of that and the schedule, because during these presentations, understand that each vendor has to demonstrate the kind of functionality like create a requisition, change a requisition.
Programs, components to the systems?
Every one of these solutions will not have all the possible functionality that this college will need. And so we already anticipate part of this process is to understand the gaps that will be created if we chose this vendor versus that vendor. And so that we understand those gaps so that when we then look to select that particular vendor because it provided the most functionality for the dollar value that we're getting, that we also then need to look at other applications that need to be integrated with that solution so that it does meet all the functionality needs we were looking for. And we went through that process of describing that type of functionality. And so there will be additional applications acquired, and it'll probably be acquired during the same process time.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, any other questions? Any other comments from anybody else? Or, yeah, let me do that first. From classified?
I was just going to say, is there any thought to the training that staff, faculty, and people using the system being taken into account?
Oh, my goodness, yes. There is lots of training involved, and because we are looking at a very aggressive time frame, as opposed to a much slower traditional. The slower traditional processes tend to deliver a certain amount of training along the way, and you sort of learn and build it together. Whereas if we're looking for a much faster implementation, that there's going to be a lot of pre-building done for us, and that we're going to have to aggressively build, and then more time will be spent on the training side of it as we move forward. Part of the strategy, too, that we're already exploring is to look at how do we leverage video to actually keep delivering that training. Yes, I went to that training session, but let me listen to it again on my own time via the web. So we'll have those types of resources lined up also.
And any other questions on, before we close, on anything else for classified, from the classified?
I have a question regarding classified employees that are hourly. Is there a particular amount of budget to be used on them, or something that is astronomically a large amount, or?
I think the budget is probably somewhat north of $5 million.
$5 million for classified hourly?
For all class,
For all
that
classified.
means, and it's for all hourly.
For all
including student hourly. Other than that, I'd actually have to look up the numbers. It's another area, obviously, that we have to look at. Hourly employees, student employees, and so overtime, yeah.
I was just wondering if there was a particular limited amount.
Well, there's a limited amount for everything,
Okay.
but I don't know it off the top of my head. Management? Anything else? Students? Faculty?
Yeah, I got two quick questions. I had some more, but it's getting late, so I'll wait till next time. But student fees, do those stay here, or do they go to the state?
No. Technically, what occurs is we keep them, but they're deducted from our apportionment. So the net effect is both. Sacramento sets the legislature sets the fee, and that is a part of our apportionment.
Okay. And then the other question, is there any reporting system for the budget right now where you can see, like on a monthly basis, how we're doing in each of these categories?
Yeah, the trouble is that most organizations in the world operate on the basis of real time. We don't. Our budget system is basically an extension of our accounting system, which means it's double entry. So you can see the debits, you can see the credits, you can see the encumbrances and all that stuff. The trouble is that we have virtually no management reports at all on the budget side. So what most people are used to in a modern organization or a 20th century organization, we don't have. So what that means is, by way of example, we operate essentially on a 13-month year. The reason is because so many of the bills occur after, and the adjustments occur after the fiscal year is actually closed. So the way that the accrual system works is that July is a really big month for us for the previous June. That makes it awkward. Furthermore, most organizations will operate on the basis of how much you expect to expend in a given month. Then you can run variance reports. We don't. What we do is we do it on the basis of a percentage of the annual expense. Well, that's not very helpful in terms of management and budgeting. So, yeah, we know exactly how much money's been spent, but the way that the information comes to managers is almost entirely useless.
In the new system, we will have dashboards and things like that that can actually keep up with this stuff very dynamically.
Okay, anybody else? Any future agenda items that we haven't already discussed? I think we've covered most of them.
The survey that I was asked to put together, it should be going out either today or tomorrow, or on Monday.
Okay. All
For
right.
getting ideas for, input from not only the students, but faculty, staff, and the community as a whole.
So the ones that you sent to me, can you load into that too?
I think.
Okay, that'd be perfect. So that we have one central repository?
Dwayne, what will that look like on the webpage? It'll be identified as ideas?
There'll be a button at the top for, and we still are yet going to work out how we want that to look.
Right.
I just want to get it developed, and then we'll be able to go through, and the only identifiers that we actually asked for, or at least I put in, is that, are you a faculty, staff, student, or community member? And that's it. We don't really want to know name or anything else. We just want to know the ideas, and then we'll bring those back or have those reported periodically.
Okay. Everybody good?
When are we gonna go through this next meeting?
Well, no, they were already approved. What we'll do is the next time
No,
we'll
I'm
have...
talking about the status, please.
No, the status piece will occur after the budget is established.
Okay.
To where we go through and check to make sure everything we said we were going to do, we actually did. So that's the reality check at the end to make sure that we did what we said we were going to do. All right, everybody good? All right, thank you, everybody. It is 2:28, and motion to adjourn? Yes? Second? Second. Okay, any objection? We are adjourned, thank you.
Good meeting.